Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the program. This is Ryan McWiggin, and welcome to the Renewed Life podcast. Today, we're talking to Eric Oberempt, who is a former addict and alcoholic. He was addicted for many years and had several arrests, facing up to 5 years in prison. He finally agreed to go to rehab and start attending AA. Today, he is a podcast host and operates a successful roofing company and gives back to the addiction community through his program, Roofers in Recovery, where they sponsor addicts in need of treatment, and his upcoming documentary, where he shows the similarities between celebrities and average Joes suffering from addiction. How's it going, Eric?
Thank you very much. Again, Eric Obremt. I've been clean and sober for almost 14 years now, and it took a really long time to figure out the why behind that because I didn't have the story of like kind of what you were relating to with the whole pain thing, right? More of my pain was mental. Um, Obviously, yeah, I worked really hard when I was young. I started in the roofing industry when I was literally 10 years old. My grandfather started our company way back in the 60s before I was born, and I moved in with my grandparents when I was very young, when I was 7. And so my grandpa basically became my dad at that point and started teaching me, hard work, right? Get on the roof. He'd throw me an axe and I'd have to start chopping tar. Excuse me. I'd have to get up and start using, those big 5-gallon plastic cement buckets and start plasticking around soil pipes. And so I learned at a very young age what hard work looked like. And as I got older, for people to hopefully kind of relate, I was in high school and yeah, I partied and, I did the things, but I also played sports and was very good at sports. And so like when we had football season, nobody drank, nobody used, nobody did
Yep.
anything because winning was more important, right?
Yep.
And then we called baseball drinking season because nobody gave a shit, right? So baseball was drinking season. You did what you wanted. I ended up foregoing playing college and sports or playing sports in college because I wanted to go to a bigger school and just have fun and party.
Yep.
And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up going to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln because I was like, this is the place to go if I'm going to party and have a good time and, not have to worry about any responsibilities really. And so I did the college thing for a while, and I'd go to class every once in a while and I drank, but I was always a drinker. And the funny part of this story is that I was always the anti-drug guy. I
Yeah.
was always, if there were drugs around, I was like,
Yep.
you fucking dirty drug
Yep.
taker guy, right? Like I was always super anti-drugs. And as I started getting older, I ended up dropping out of school, calling my grandpa, and I was like, hey, I'm all in. Like, I'm all in on this roofing thing. Like, give me more leads. I'll go sell more stuff. I started selling more, estimating more, trying to get out of the actual trade of doing the work, right? But then you start making a little bit more money, right? So now you have access to be able to buy more stuff. Then I went through a couple of divorces and I was getting DUIs along the way. So I got my first DUI when I was 19 years old, got my first DUI, and then I would go every 3 years. So I'd be on probation maybe for like a year and a half, and I'd be good. And then I'd start to tailspin and I'd start to self sabotage, and then I get popped again. And it usually always correlated with a girlfriend or a wife getting divorced or breaking up. Always had to do with a girl. And so, or not had to do with, but it always correlated in that timeline, right? And after my second divorce, I just kind of went off a ledge, and I didn't give a shit anymore. I was the fattest cokehead you ever met. I started doing coke when I was about 26. I started selling coke after I paid retail the first time, and I was like, that's really expensive. I was like, can I just buy a bunch of it and sell it to people? And they're like, sure you can, Eric. And so they gave me whatever I wanted so I could go sell it. And I was 310 pounds, big, fat, bloated head, just looked horrible. There was no way I was going to live to see 40, right? I was going to be lucky if I saw 30. And I went for 2.5 years about like that. And I ended up getting my fourth offense felony DUI. And what was interesting was about 3 months before that, I tell this story in my keynote that I give, but about 3 months before that, it was actually my 30th birthday. And I was having a party at my house. And there was probably 30, 40 people in this little tiny Cracker Jack, starter house that I was living in. And I was sitting at the table, and I had a big glass table. And everybody would rip lines off that glass table. And we'd play a game called Snakes, where you'd make the biggest, fattest line that you could, and you'd go as hard as you could for as long as you could until you puked or, before you threw up or died, I guess, was the second option. And I was playing this snake game. And all of a sudden I had this really weird moment of clarity and silence where all the music went away. I can literally remember this like it was yesterday. All the music went away. All the people went away. And I looked up at the ceiling, and I'm not like a religious dude. I'm not like any of those things. And I look up and I was just like, how do I make this stop? I don't know how to make this stop. And that lasted 10 seconds, right? It felt like an hour, but it lasted 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden, all of the noise started coming back. All the people started coming back in my head. I went right back to that table and I ripped that line. And I went hard for another 3, 4, 5 months. And then I got my fourth offense, felony DUI. And had all kinds of coke on me, somehow dodged all those charges. That's a whole nother story. And I still didn't quit. Wow. I still kept going after I got out of jail. I went to jail for 3 or 4 days. I got out. I still kept going. I was forced to go get an alcohol evaluation. Anybody that's ever had a DUI or an MIP or anything like that knows the old alcohol evaluation. And I went and got an alcohol evaluation, and this guy, Mark, told me, he said, you need to go to inpatient treatment. And I was like, fuck you. I'm like, I got a mortgage. I got shit to pay for. I don't have 30 days to go sit in an inpatient. And I'll never forget, he gave me his card. And I brought his card home, and it sat next to my couch on my end table. And I used it as a Coke funnel to put Coke into baggies. And it was covered in residue, like to the point where you couldn't even see his name. And about 3 months later, I literally looked over at this card, and I picked it up, and being a cokehead, I licked the fucking card so I can see it, right? Use it to have a little gummy. And I look at the card, and I see his name and his phone number. And I picked up the phone, and I called him, and I said, I think it's time. I think I'm ready. And that was when I decided to go to treatment, with still not necessarily wanting to get sober, but wanting to figure out how to not go to prison. And I went to treatment in this little town in Nebraska called O'Neill, Nebraska, out in the middle of nowhere. Treatment centers are smart, by the way. They put treatment centers in the middle of fucking nowhere, so that you can't get away, right? And back then we didn't have Ubers or anything like that. So like to get a cab or a taxi to drive you back to Omaha was going to be like $1,000, right? And I didn't have $1,000. And I was there for a total of a month. It took about 2 weeks before I had a realization. I was in a lecture hall. Somebody was speaking. And in the middle of the lecture, I was looking around and I just went, holy shit, I'm in rehab. And I said it out loud verbally. And everybody stopped and looked at me like, what the fuck? What is wrong with this guy? And I just had this moment, and I was like, normal people don't fucking go to rehab. They just don't. Like, there's nobody in this room that's fucking okay, right? Like, even the counselors, right? Most of the counselors were fucking drunks as well, right? At one time.
At one point,
yeah. And I was like, maybe, and this has become like my mantra to everybody that I work with. I'm like, maybe I just need to shut the fuck up and listen. Maybe it's time for that. And so I opened that door that they talk about so much in treatment and rehab and recovery, is just open that door a little bit to be willing to listen. And I decided that I was willing to listen. And I started doing the steps, and I started working with the sponsor, and I started doing all the stuff. And I went home, and this is no joke. I went home, and my old drug dealer came over to my house. And he goes, so what are you going to do? He goes, are you coming back out with us or are you going to do this sober bullshit? And I said, give me a month. He go, give me a month. I go, give me a month to try this. I'm like, and if I hate it, I'll be back out with you guys. I said, but if I get something out of it, I'm gonna see what happens. I'm like, I invested a lot of time and money into going to this place, so give me a month. And I gave it a month, and I found a sponsor, and I found people who gave a shit about what actually happened to me as a human, and that was it. And I was like, nope, this is the life that I want to figure out how to live. And so that's how I got to where I am, or at least to where I got to a point where I was willing to continue doing the work so that I could become that human that I was supposed to be and not the piece of shit that I was living as for so many years.
What was it about those people that, or how did they make you feel? Or what was it that they did that you felt that they cared about you? And I mean your spirit, your soul.
I had never been around, like, the closest person to me was my grandfather, right? And kind of like your dad, he was the person that I had my first drink with, right?
Yeah.
And I was, God, I don't even remember how old I was, but I want to say I was probably like, he probably gave me a beer when I was 10 or 12, right? Um, but he was the person that I drank with a lot. He was my best friend. And I knew that he cared about me, though. He didn't know what he was doing in the moment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I realized that all of these people that were trying to help me at this facility, I was like, why are you so nice?
Yeah.
I was like, why are you so nice to me? Like, don't you know who I am? Don't you know that I am a pile of shit? Like, don't you know all of the things that I've done? Don't you know the people that I've hurt? And like, they did, because I had to fucking tell them, right? So like, they knew all of these things that I'd done in my past, and they still claimed to love me. And they still told me what I needed to do to be better. And they still held me accountable to those things. Because what I learned on later on in life was, especially running a business, is accountability equals love. But a lot of people see it the other way because they think accountability is a bad word, right? And that you're being hard on somebody. But like, if you don't hold people accountable, you don't really give a shit about what happens to them. And these people care. They're like, you need to go to meetings. You need to do 90 meetings in 90 days. You need to get a sponsor. You need to do the steps. And then you get a sponsor that like loves you, and you get to share all of this stuff with, that you've been holding in for so long because you didn't feel comfortable having that conversation with anybody. And you let all of this stuff out, and you're able to let it go and give it to God, and all this, the different things that we do in doing the 12 steps. And I never felt like, I don't want to say like I didn't think my family loved me. Like, I know that they did, but they didn't know how to love me in this space, right? Because they didn't get me. So what I run into a lot is I go speak at conferences, or I speak on things like this, and I'll get phone calls or messages on social media, and it's always a mom that messages me about her son.
Yeah.
What can I do to help my son? And I'm like, nothing. I'm like, are you an alcoholic? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, then you don't get him. I was like, you can't help him. Like, all you can do is be there for him and support him in everything that he's going to have to do to get this figured out. But I'm like, but you can't do shit, because he's not going to respect necessarily your quote unquote opinion on how he needs to get better, because you've never done it, right? You don't want to work for a company for some guy that's never sold a roof, right? If you're going to get into
Right.
roofing, you want to work for a guy that sold hundreds and thousands of roofs, right? And had hundreds and thousands of them built, and knows how to do that step by step by step, so that they can teach you step by step by step how to sell a roof, right? It's the same thing in recovery. That's why we have to work with other alcoholics and other addicts, is because we have done the work now, and we actually understand how to do it. And so that's why we have to find these people in our communities to be able to give back and to direct people to that. The people in that treatment center, they knew who I was, and they still loved me. They didn't judge me for it, and they wanted to give me tools to be better. And I'd never had that kind of support because I didn't understand it until then. And that was what changed my life, and it made me want to be more like them. Right?
Right.
No chance I want to be a fucking counselor. Like, I don't want, you know what I mean? Like, not a job I want, right? I don't want to bust my ass and make $35,000 a year, right? Like, I have no desire to be a counselor. Like, those people do God's work, like 1,000%. I don't want to do that. But in the things that I do now with the nonprofit, I get to do it. And that's what I tell everybody on my team. I'm like, guys, we need to sell a shitload of widgets so that we can do the things to be able to give back and help. I can't help people with the nonprofit. I can't help, whatever it is that we all want to help. For me, it's drunks, right? And I want to be able to give back and send people to treatment. I can't do that if we don't sell a bunch of fucking widgets, right? And widgets for me is a roof. And so that's my purpose is it's not the money and the tangible things that we get. Yeah, I like nice things. Who doesn't, right? Like, and I'm still going to buy cool shit. But if I don't have the capital and the assets, I can't help the people that help me the same way. And so that's why I care so much.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
One sister. Like I said, parents got divorced when I was 7. So I lived in an odd, kind of odd situation. Obviously, I had my grandpa and my grandma who were kind of my mom and my dad, but my sister was there and my mom was there too, but she was living in the basement and trying to go back to school because my dad had taken all the money and taken off and, married somebody else. And so like she was kind of doing her thing. She was always there and like never absent. But I just gravitated towards my grandfather. So I basically grew up in the 50s, right? Like I grew up in the 50s the same way that my grandpa's kids would have grown up when it was really the early 90s, right? It was late 80s, early mid 90s when I was growing up. But I was raised as a 50s, 60s kid, right? I remember, just as an example, my senior year of high school, when you're a senior, everybody has a big senior party, right? And I lived in Nebraska, and somebody went and got somebody's land that they could, lock the gates, and everybody'd go out to the land and have a bonfire and park trucks around it and get drunk all night, right? And that's your senior party. And I remember going to my grandpa and I was like, hey, Grant, senior party's tonight. And I know that, we've got a job tomorrow, but like, can I go to the senior party instead? And he was like, I don't give a fuck what you do, but you got work at 6 a.m. And I was like, okay, I don't know if you heard me, but I said, like, there's a senior party tonight. So can I go to that? And he's like, yeah, I don't know if you heard me. I don't give a shit what you do, but you got work tomorrow at 6. I'm like, fuck. And so I literally had to make a decision in that moment as a senior in high school, 17, 18 years old. I didn't go to my senior party because I had to work the next day. And then that's just kind of an example of like what I grew up in. So like I had a good childhood because I had my grandpa, but a weird childhood because at 12, 10, 8, 9, 10 years old, I had to go to court for the divorce and like testify against my dad in a judge's chambers alone. That's fucking weird. Kids shouldn't have to do that, right? Like they shouldn't have to be part of that. My dad would show up at my house. My grandpa chased him off the fucking steps with a baseball bat, right? Like just weird shit. But in the same breath, had an amazing family unit though, right? So I don't feel like I missed anything, but grew up with my grandfather who drank every day, may or may not have been an alcoholic, but drank every day and normalized that to me.
Yeah.
Right. And normalized that, just like your story. Right. And normalized that. And that was what we did on Christmas, big Christmas Eve party. Everybody came over and got drunk. When I was 14, I was like, that's when I could drink every Christmas. Right. Like grandpa's like, yep, that's what you get to do on Christmas Eve. You get to drink. Go ahead. And normalized it. And so I don't blame anybody, obviously, from alcoholism. Like that was going to manifest itself no matter what. But just looking back, you can see all those little things that happen, right, over time that made it much easier for me to get to where I was going to end up eventually anyway.
Did you I know that listened to a couple of your podcasts, and uh, just for the viewers,
Yeah.
you spend a lot of time talking about like underlying issues and you know.
I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I was even playing sports and winning championships and all this stuff. Like I love being part of a team and I love being part of something. But I even you win all the awards and you do all these things, and I always still felt like an outsider. I still always felt like, man, I sure would still like to be in that group though, right? And I always felt like I was in the outside looking in. And what drugs and alcohol gave to me was an opportunity to feel like I was part of a thing, right? And everybody wanted to be around me if I had enough booze or if I had enough coke,
Right.
especially if I had enough coke, because then girls wanted to be around you. And they would be around you and the party would go until you ran out. And then as soon as you fucking ran out, or as soon as you run out, you can look around the room and see how long it takes, and everyone's gone. And nobody comes back until you pick up the phone. You go, I got re-upped. I'm set up. Like, come on back. And I think then all of a sudden that made it even worse, right? And so that I'd want more and more and more because it could do two things. It would mask my insecurities and it would make me then feel part of that group because again then I'd get them to come back, right? And I just wanted to be comfortable in my own skin and be okay with who I was. And I had no idea how to do that, which is why I am so passionate today about being authentic, right? It's why I named the
Right.
podcast Be Authentic or Get the Fuck Out, because
Right.
I want people to know that they don't have to be what other people want them to be, right? You get to be whoever it is that you are, and we are all fucking different. We are all different in some respect, and it's okay to be different. And some of us don't know who the fuck we are yet, right? And we need to maybe spend a little time and maybe spend a little money to figure that out so that we can be comfortable in our own skin. So what did I do? I started making my own groups, right? I mean, that was literally my answer. I was like, well, if I don't fit in to all these other ones and I don't want to be a follower, because I think that was another thing. I didn't like following people.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I was like, I'll make my own shit, right? It's why I've never had a partner in any of my businesses. It's why, I joined groups and stuff with masterminds and things like that, but it's why I launched my own group and why I launched my own mastermind, because I want to facilitate these things so that I can help other people feel part of something and not feel left out. And hopefully I do a good job at that because I know the pain that comes from feeling alone. And there is no worse pain than feeling alone and laying in your bed saying, I don't care if I wake up.
Oh,
There's there
hallelujah.
there's no worse pain than that. And so I want to be able to facilitate that for other people that are going through that pain so that they can realize that they don't have to be in pain anymore. Right? We're all making choices every day. Right? We're all making choices. And the only choice that I have, as we all know, is whether or not I pick up the first drink. Right? That's my choice that I get to make every day. I don't get many choices after I do that. But we all have a choice. And so everybody's like, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm like, how about today you don't fucking drink? Just today.
Right.
Just don't drink today. I'm like, and then let's jump on the phone tomorrow. Tell me if you did what you said you were going to do. And then if you do that, then let's deal with tomorrow. And then then we'll go to a meeting and then we'll talk to somebody and then we'll explore all these crazy things that you're talking about that are above my pay grade of, you know what I mean? Like, let's do a fourth and a fifth and figure out if your childhood fucked you up and, whatever. But like, everybody gets so far ahead, especially alcoholics. We all want to read ahead, right? We all want to go from step 1 to fucking 9, right? And ignore everything in between because like we're smarter than everybody else in the room. So like we can do that. And that's why we need mentors and people in our lives to be able to tell us to slow down
Mm.
and shut the fuck up and listen.
Yeah, I had to shut up for I had one of those old AA. I guess well, the old 12-step program, guys, and I was told to shut the fuck up for the first year that I
Yep.
was there, and nobody wanted to hear a word out of from me, and I think I was probably like 10 months in, and I had finished my steps, and that's when they allowed me to say something. So it wasn't quite a year, but it was, when I
Yeah.
finished my steps. And really why I was in such a rush to finish them was that, unlike everything else in my life, that I wasn't a cheat. I didn't cheat things. But I would I'd look to cut corners, and I was a procrastinator all my life and everything. Uh, but with sobriety, I did not do that, and I did everything that they told me, including do not date anybody for the first year.
No,
And it
I
was,
didn't listen to that.
yeah, a lot of people didn't, but
Yeah.
it kind of, if I had an opportunity, I guess I might not have abided by that, but I just didn't. I stayed
Yeah.
away from women. I was a hermit for about a year.
I wish I would have.
Um,
I wish I would have listened, but yeah.
I saved a lot of money. A lot
Yeah.
of money I saved
Uh,
during that first year, because when I did then start to date, boy, I started to date a lot. But because I thought to myself, I'm like, I saw a lot of guys making that kind of 12-step or 13-step mistake, where
yeah.
they would find people in recovery, and I saw a lot of that in my first year. And I just said, I don't think I really want anybody in recovery, because,
And it's predatory.
yeah, well, not for me. I didn't.
Not for, I'm not saying for
Oh,
you. I'm just,
from
yeah,
men,
like,
yeah, men,
yeah,
yeah,
like you
men do
see
that
it
a
and
lot,
yeah, it becomes really predatory.
right? And I just thought for myself, I'm like, Jesus, I'm screwed up enough. Like, how many screwed up people do you need in a relationship? So,
Facts.
so I didn't date people that were in recovery for a while, and I then met my current wife, and she's in recovery, but she wasn't in recovery when I met her, and we went out for a while, we dated for a while, and then finally I just said, hey, you're a lot younger than I am. You still have a lot of fun, I guess, out there for you. I just can't. I can't be around this kind of fun. So, why don't we take a break? But it wasn't really a break. I'm like, I just can't be around this, because
Yeah.
it's a little bit too much. And really, what it was is I was concerned about how much she drank. And when you are an alcoholic, I don't know about you, but, like, for me, I'm old school 12 step, and this is my problem and nobody else's. I'm not a prohibitionist. I don't tell people that they can't drink
Right.
at all. And if I feel uncomfortable with the way you drinking, it's my obligation to get the fuck out of the room.
Yep.
And if you're in my house, it's your obligation to get the fuck out.
When I tell you
And
to. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and all, but peace, love, I love you to death, but just
Yep.
I can't be around this anymore. And
Yep.
and that with her, I had to tell her, and I was very, very pleased about 8 months later when she came, and we had been communicating, and she was going to meetings and doing her steps, and 8 months later we got back together, and the both of us have been sober and happy since, and we've been married now for 7 years,
That's an
and
amazing
have.
story. Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, because for the longest time I never thought that I would ever find. I never thought that I would be married again, ever.
Yeah, me
I
either.
never
Me either.
I never wanted to.
Uh-uh.
I never thought it would. I didn't know what it would do for me until I met my wife, and when I met her, I said to myself, I can live without her for about 24 hours. That's about it.
Wow.
And she's a big time lady, so she travels a lot with work. I travel. I have my intervention business, and I leave home. But when I do my interventions, I will do an intervention. I try to do it at the end of the week, and I do them in the morning, because I try to get the intervention over with. If it's successful, there's a 4 o'clock flight, which will get me to West Palm. I can drop off my person and then I can literally stay on the plane or just get back on the same plane that I was and go right back home. And the people from one of the rehab facilities will pick them up right from the airport.
Interesting. I didn't know.
So
I didn't know that about you. You have an intervention business. That's cool as
yeah,
shit.
so I have been. So when I quit drinking and I went back to work, and I told my first clients that I'm not gonna represent you unless you get some treatment. Then I would get people and they'd say, well, where do I get treatment? And I just started bringing people back to the place that I went,
Right.
because that's what I knew.
And that's what we
And
do with Roofers in Recovery. We literally aligned with the place that I went to treatment. And it's the most amazing thing when people get out and it's like we have this like bond now.
bond, the connection, like an
Yeah.
alumni. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like for real. Isn't that's such a
yeah.
real thing?
Yep. I take them to. I mean, I have facilities all over the country, but I take them primarily to about 5 different places
Okay.
that I know very well, and I know the programs very well. I didn't. One of them I went to. The other four I didn't. But a lot of the people that.
Thank God you only went to one. What's interesting about my story is so when I got my fourth, I didn't know it at the time. And my lawyer was actually a buddy of mine who like I drank and sold cocaine to. And so like we partied together, right? And he didn't tell me this or he didn't know, but the judge that I had, it turned out I found out a year or two later was actually in recovery.
Yeah.
And my lawyer was smart enough to say, if you don't go to treatment, like you are fucked for sure. You're getting 1 to 5 years in prison for sure if you don't go to treatment. But if you go to treatment, there's an opportunity to maybe get less time. And I was like, okay, well, I can do math. So I'll go, 30 days in treatment is better than 1 to 5 years in prison. And so I came back and I was doing the deal and I was going to meetings and I had a sponsor and he showed me grace and he gave me the lower sentence.
Yeah.
And so much time went by where I was, doing steps and figuring stuff out. And it probably took me 5, 6 years. And I realized what a gift it was, though, of what he gave me. He literally saved my life, right? He threw me in jail for 90 days, which was the minimum. And he didn't let me out right away because I was approved for house arrest. And he said, nah, fuck you. You're sitting in there for a while, right? Because it was in district court and it was a felony. So, like, you couldn't just get out, right? Like, the judge had to
Yeah. Yeah.
approve it.
Yeah. I know.
Judge had to approve it. And so I'm waiting there every day looking at the CO. Like, is my name on the list? He's like, not today, fucker. And it was every day. Like, is today the day? Is today the day? And some years later, I didn't know how to find this guy because obviously, like judges aren't on Facebook, right? You're not just going to go
No.
fucking
No.
find a judge, right? And so my current business attorneys are obviously well connected in the area that I grew up. And I was like, if I write this letter, I'm like, can you at least get it to him?
Mm.
And I wrote a letter and told him thank you. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
want you to know that you probably had 3,000 me's in front of you over the years, if not more, right? Because he wasn't a young guy. And I was like, you probably had, thousands of me's in front of you, and you probably gave a lot of them a chance and an opportunity and a break. And a lot of them probably pissed it away. And I'd like you to know that there was at least one that didn't. There was one that didn't piss away the opportunity that you gave me. And now I'm doing everything I can to give back to be able to try and help the people that are in the same position and will probably be in front of you again someday. So I gave it to my attorneys. They said they delivered it. Obviously, I didn't exactly get a phone call from Judge Hardigan letting me know that he got it. But at least I got here's the point of that story. I got to do that. I got to
Yeah.
have an opportunity to do that and say thank you to somebody who sentenced me to jail, right? I got to send a letter to somebody who threw me in jail to say thanks.
Yeah.
That shit doesn't happen unless you make a change in your life and as we call it, a psychic change, right? Like unless you have that moment, and over time you have this psychic change of changing exactly who you are. Um, I mean, who the fuck thinks that is a thing that someone would ever do, is thank a judge for sending them to jail? And
The
I got to do that.
that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that you would do that, because it doesn't surprise me that somebody who would be a grateful for the 90 days that they got. Not many people say that. Um, I'm telling you, had you been my client for your first DUI, that probably would have been the end for you. It probably had you and I known one another,
Yeah,
that it could have. And I'm not blaming your lawyer. It's just, but it is what it is. I mean, this literally is my expertise, and it's sort of my wheelhouse.
yeah,
Um, and because a person that has a moral compass, which is what you have. Early on when we were talking, you were talking about your grandfather is the most seminal relationship that you have in your life. I could tell that just from you, you're just emoting,
hmm,
and we're on a podcast, and I
right,
can't even see you hardly, but I can feel that truth from you. Um, and whatever it was that your grandfather, gave you, the thing that made you skip your senior party because you knew that your family obligation was more important. That's what I believe. Whatever made you do that is what made you who you are, made you get sober, and made you write that letter, made you be happy with the 90 days, but really made you the sober person that you are now, helping other people. Have you ever tried to identify what that is? Discipline? Is it? Because I got the same thing in me, and it's kind of odd. The person that I don't blame for my alcoholism. I was going to be an alcoholic anyways, but there was a lot of shit that my old man did that kind of helped me along. But the odd thing is that the same person who kind of helped me become an alcoholic gave me the thing that I needed to get the hell out of there in the first place. And a lot of that had to do with when I was in rehab. And I have that same thing in common with you. And I was going to ask you about this. What role does guilt and shame play, or did it play, in your recovery? Did it hinder your recovery, or did it help your recovery? Because I know for me that nobody necessarily guilted or shamed me. I did that to.
I lived in guilt and shame because every relationship I had, I fucked up. Every person I was around, I did something horrible to them, because I only thought about myself and I never thought about anybody, never thought about others, only thought about me and how a certain situation would affect me. Um, the guilt and shame that I had for so many years, the hardest part was being able to have the conversations to forgive myself for the things that I'd done and for the people that I'd hurt. That was the only way, because like you said, the guilt and the shame give you the opportunity or give you the ability to make that next step, right? Because you're like, there is something better. I need to be better. But then once you start that process, you have to figure out how to get rid of it. So it's the catalyst maybe to get you moving, but you can't fucking live in it. You got to let it go. You got to shed that
Right.
skin at some point, right? And that only happens by doing the work. Um, but I think that was probably one of the hardest things for me to do in this journey of sobriety, was letting go of the guilt and the shame, because I wanted to own it, because I thought it would keep me going, right? I thought it would keep me going down that path, because it's like, if I forget
Right.
that and I think that, man, you got it all figured out. Here's one thing I remember my counselor asked me before I left treatment, and she said, "What are you the most afraid of
Yeah.
leaving?" And I said, "Getting better." I was deathly afraid of getting better, because I knew the minute that I got better in my mind, right, or got clean or wasn't drinking anymore, that I was going to then automatically assume I had it all figured out. And every fucking time I think I got shit figured out,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I piss it right down the drain.
Right. Right.
And I was so scared of that.
You
So
had a
scared of
history
that.
of pink. Did you have a history of pink clouding?
I never tried to get sober before, but I had,
Oh, okay.
but I had a history. I had a history of self sabotage. Of, like I said in the beginning, get a DUI, be good for a little while, and then figure, like have a relationship with a gal, whatever it is, and then give it enough time. And if things are really good, I am going to figure out a way to fuck it up
Fuck this up. Yeah.
every single time. Every single time. Like there is nothing in my history, in my past, other than what I'm living now that says otherwise. there is no other story. Like, no, 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 you did this. Nope, then I fucked that up. Like I fucked up everything until I was able to learn that that didn't have to be me anymore. Right. And to forgive myself for all of the shit that I did. Not forget about it, but forgive myself for it. Then I was able to move on and have a family and have a wife now and have a daughter. I've got a daughter and a wife today that have never seen me drink. They don't know that person. They've never met that fucking human. There's only like
Mm.
4 people in my life still today that know that guy from 15 years ago. Right? And there's all
Yeah.
these new people in my life, and they're like, dude, I don't even believe you, right? Like people come to a roofers and recovery meeting and they're like, yeah, easy for you. You were never like me. Like you're you. And it's like, dude, like I don't want to sit here and have a drunk-a-log, but like you don't have a fucking story that's gonna one up. Like we've all lived the same thing. It just happens to be I'm a little bit further removed from it and I've done some
Yeah.
work. Right? Like that's all it is. And I'm one drink away. Like I know exactly what would happen if I had a drink today within 2 weeks, minimum, because I would white knuckle. I've thought this whole
Yep.
thing through. Like I'm crazy, right? I'm an alcoholic. I've thought this whole thing through. I'm like, the first day if I drink, I'll be okay, and I could have a drink and I would be fine, and I would be like, and I would all day I'd be like, I'm not having another one. I'm not having another one. I'm going to show these fuckers that I can have one, and then the next day I would probably have two, and then within a week or so it would just be the whole bottle, and I'd have Coke delivered, and I'd lose my family, and I'd lose my daughter. And it would
Right.
probably take 2 to 3 weeks max, because I could white knuckle one or two drinks probably for a week or two, and then I just know that I couldn't. Like I have literally had dreams. I just know exactly what would happen, and the fact that I know is the reason that I just don't have the first one, and it just makes my
Right.
life so much fucking easier.
Right. I got to go grab a. I got to go. I'll be able to talk to you and walk. I got to go grab a battery or a charger.
Okay.
But my wife and I have a deal, and similar to yours, and it's. I always tell her, if you ever see me drinking, I want you to leave me immediately, because the only chance that we have, if I ever started drinking again, is if you left me. And I'm like, I don't want you to stick around for 1 second. I want you to just kick me out of the house and tell me to go, because I don't need this anymore in my life. I
Yeah.
want to go just like that again, because I know that's how I get sober. I get sober when you take away the things that I love. And I said, what got me sober before, what nearly killed me, was when she took my kids away from me.
I have never
And
had that
that's,
conversation, but I'm going to now. Thank you for that.
yep, yep. And because I tell her, and I'm like, the only way that our daughter will be able to keep her daddy is if you take her away from me.
Oh my God.
And that will get me back to rehab immediately and I'm like, I don't need you to bring me. I'll find my way. I know how to get there. And I'll come back in 30 days and I'll sleep on the porch. And when you're ready, you can let me back in the house. And these liquid, like the seltzer with vodka in them now. And I'm like,
Oh,
you guys, this is like highway robbery. You're not even trying anymore.
no,
You're not even flavoring this shit.
no, no. You never
It's
see
a
a real
vodka
alcoholic
soda.
drinking. Yeah, you never see a real alcoholic drinking those anyway, though, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, you can
White
always tell
Claw.
if you're drinking a White Claw, you'd be like, you're a normie, like you're fine.
What kind of percentage do those things have in them? Is it like a beer or is it more?
it's less. I think it's less because it's not vodka in it,
Oh yeah, it is.
is it?
Ah, with White Claw, yeah. You're thinking of like the light, like the Bud Light ones. Bud Light makes seltzer too. That
Oh,
alcohol's melt from so that alcohol is made from malt. But
okay.
how you make the alcohol doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no,
So
I don't know. My wife drinks a couple of those every once in a while, and like, because my wife's normal, right? And so like, she'll have a couple of drinks and like whatever, she doesn't care, and I don't care, Like, I'm like, don't fuck. She has a number though; it's three, and I know that if she has more than three, I'm like, sleep in the other fucking room or go get a hotel. I'm like, because I ain't dealing with you. But like, but she drinks those, and like, they don't affect her, like, because she's not allowed to drink hard alcohol though, because she is part Irish. And so I was
yeah,
like, you don't get to drink hard alcohol because you start fights and punch people in the mouth, when you do. So like,
yep.
let's just not do that. But that's hilarious. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I don't know what the world's come to. Like, whatever happened to just taking a bottle and just fucking putting it down like a man, right? And go to rehab.
So we had a major pop star from the 1960s and 70s. Her son went to rehab with us too. And for some particular reason, I don't know why, but he decided it would be a really good idea to come back and rob the place. So he came back at like 2 o'clock in the morning and he stole all the televisions out of the rehab place. And then he took them into like downtown Palm Beach Gardens or something and pawned them.
Oh
the
my
kid's
God.
mother's the kid's mother's like a billionaire, and he's stealing TVs from the rehab that he's in. Yeah, it's rather strange behavior. But I always told people, I'm like, that man, there is definitely not a movie, but like a movie with like two sequels in it
Yeah.
about like rehab, because in most of the movies that I've seen about rehab, they're not all that good, because they really don't show you. I don't know about your experience, but how much fun it was. And I think, and this is what I tell a lot of my clients, and I'm like, expect to have a lot of fun in rehab. Don't tell your wife that or your husband, but expect to have a lot of fun. And it's not bad fun. It's good fun. And they're like, well, what do you mean good fun? And I go, you're going to belly laugh with people that have been feeling the same way that you've been feeling for a really long time. And
Yeah.
they've held the same secrets that you've been keeping for a very long time. And everybody really wants to unburden themselves, and everybody wants to just find a soul that they can talk to and they can relate to. So, don't be surprised if you have a lot of laughter when you're there, because I
And
certainly did. I don't know
and
about you.
and remember that a rehab 10 is like a 4 in real life.
Right.
If you're a guy, like that was always, that's a joke with my buddy, because like you'd go in like, oh my God, look at her, right?
Yeah.
There was always that, and it was like, and then all of a sudden, because they came in just as messed up as you,
Yeah.
right? And nobody and everybody, like, the point of that is, don't start a relationship in fucking rehab, right?
No.
Like, for people that are going to rehab, it's like you go in there and you have this weird connection with people because you're there together. And it's like, if you've got a male female outfit that you're going to, don't bang people in rehab, because really
Mm.
bad stuff is going to happen if you do. I saw so many people get kicked out, not have the opportunity to stay because they were more concerned about getting together with somebody during rehab. Like, if anybody is watching and ever does go to rehab, man, that is the big, like, I didn't do that. But it's like impossible not to cross your mind, when you're there. Like, it's a real thing for people that are going. And like, man, if there's ever a suggestion of like, go to rehab and, like you said, enjoy it, right? Enjoy the people that you're getting to spend time with, because like, you're there in this common bond and you're on this ship together.
Right. Yeah. I had that experience when I was there. We had a completely separate male and female facility. The only ones that were together were actually the one that Larry was in, was the 50 and over community.
Mm.
The 50 and over community was a separate unit, and they had males and females together. When I went to rehab, I think I was 36. And so there were no females around, but there were a couple of the younger guys that would sneak over across the pond
Yep.
to the girl facility. I never did that. I had just gotten divorced, and I was really depressed, and all I could think about was my kids, and that was sort of the last thing that was on my mind.
Yeah,
And which is probably why I stayed single for so long, or didn't date anybody for so long, because I
you had
really wanted
kids.
to and I needed to and they were only 2 and 3,
Mm.
so I didn't know it at the time, but what I was doing is I was building a real relationship with them. Um, and
I love what you do. Like I am so happy that there are people like you out there that do what you do in the profession, and I like it. It blows my mind because that's not a world I live in anymore. And I appreciate that, and just honestly like want to say thank you because like you're in the fucking trenches and changing lives. So like that's a big deal, and I love that. Thank you.
tell how many people are in roofers in recovery now?
It's hard to explain, like, so because roofers, because nobody's in roofers in recovery per se. So roofers in recovery in and itself is a nonprofit organization
Yep,
where we raise money to send people to treatment. In the last
I got
in the last 4 years, we've probably sent 50 people to treatment. But in the last year, the organization structure has changed. We still do that. We still send people to treatment that are in our industry that we want to help. We also have online meetings for people to come to. We have an online Facebook community for people to be able to interact with each other. But recently, the board has changed and the business has grown to where now we have actually purchased a facility in southern Colorado that is going to be turned into an inpatient treatment center, a detox. There's going to have a sober living community, and we're looking at buying properties all over the country to be able to have different rehab centers. So now there's a lot of people way fucking smarter than me that are part of the organization to be able to put those parts and pieces together because we wanted to impact people on a larger level. Obviously, those treatment centers aren't just for roofers in recovery, patients are for everybody. But then it'll give roofers in recovery the opportunity to send more people because we'll be able to send approximately 3 for every one that we were sending before cost wise, right? Because it's going to, significantly decrease our cost to be able to
right.
send people. So, we have, we have thousands of people in our online community, that are interacting, and, we have meetings a couple days a week where, I have 20, 30 people that come to meetings and stuff like that. But we've sent 50, 60 people to treatment over the last handful of years. But now we're trying to expand the scope to be able to help more and more people.
That is fantastic. I probably take out of every 3 or 4 people, I'll have one scholarship. And so I have taken, God, I think it's 68 people to rehab in the past 15 years, and
Wow.
like I actually escorted them.
Mm-hmm.
I've done well over 100 interventions, and it's been more work than I could ask for.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's overwhelming
Yep.
with how much need there is, and there really aren't a lot of resources,
Right.
and there's a lot of people willing to help. There's a lot of people wanting to get involved, but I always tell them, I'm like, not to be crude, but this just comes down to money. It comes down to dollars and cents, because rehab costs a lot of money in
A
this
lot of
country,
money.
a lot of money,
Yep.
and it's mostly red tape, insurance, and regulations.
Yep.
And we had a great facility in Connecticut for the longest time, which was the first facility, and it's called High Watch Farm. And High Watch Farm was started by Bill W. So that's a pretty good pedigree. And High Watch was my go-to place for a long time because they didn't have a hospital, and because they didn't have a hospital, you couldn't detox there. And
Uh,
because you couldn't detox there, the cost of it was really low.
yeah.
So you couldn't get insurance to pay for it, but at the price that it was, you could get 6 or 7 family members, everybody throwing in 1,000, maybe $2,000, and
Yep.
you could have enough money to send, a little Ricky to rehab. But it's the places that have the hospital facilities already. And as you know, with opiates, but really with alcohol, alcohol withdrawal is very, very dangerous. and you almost definitely need to be in a hospital when you're doing that, or at least in
Yeah.
a facility that has medical personnel on staff.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people who have had grand mal seizures, and that's nowhere that you certainly don't want that to happen to anybody.
Correct.
But I tell you what, I actually, ironically, I have an intervention to get to
All right.
later today,
This has been
and
great, man. Thank you for having me.
yeah, I really am. I'm really happy to meet you, and I'm very happy. Again, you and I have a very very similar story,
Hmm.
and I think we're both out there doing the same thing for the same reason, for the same kind of people,
Yep.
and it feels good having a brother out there. So thanks, Eric, for being on the program. I hope to talk to you again soon, and I wish you the best of luck with roofers in recovery, and I wish you and your rehab the best of luck. And if we could partner someday in the future, I would love to. I have a television show that is in development right now, that sort of, not sort of, but it's going to show this sort of avenue that I have between the legal system and recovery,
Love that.
and essentially follow me through dealing with one of my clients from when they
Mm.
first come in as a client. Then I identify that they have some sort of an issue, and then we take them to rehab, and then we see if we can get the judge, kind of like in your experience. Just imagine in your experience if that was filmed, how dramatic that would be.
Super.
So that's what we're trying to do. And
Yeah.
I'm partnering now. I've partnered with 6 different recovery centers who are going to be accepting scholarships, because we're going to be doing this for poor people a lot like you. And I'm going to be giving them free legal work, and then we're going to be getting them some rehab and then some aftercare as well. And hopefully we could save some lives. But so in the future, if we could work together in any way, I look forward to that.
I love that, man. Thank you very much. And I would love to do that as well. I hope that we stay connected.
Me too. Take care, buddy.
Thank you.